Southeast Asia versus Paraguay. Which is actually the safer place to live in? Today we're going to be discussing personal experiences of ours as well as facts covering these two geographic locations. Now let's start out talking about natural disasters, and I'm going to start out talking about Asia. Now there are some countries in Southeast Asia actually that are safer from like natural disasters than others. For instance, I would say probably a place like Cambodia is less prone to receiving a natural disaster than probably Thailand or the Philippines. Now in the Philippines, they have the concept of typhoons. So there is a typhoon season in the Philippines. Now in the Caribbean, it's called a hurricane, right? In the Pacific, they call it typhoon. And typhoons are very strong in the Philippines, and oftentimes they devastate not only entire cities, but entire regions in the Philippines. They can be really strong and severely damaging to the infrastructure, homes, and so forth. Now, in a place like, I would say, Malaysia, that's less of a problem, especially in East Malaysia, which is on the island of Borneo. Natural disasters are not super common there. But if we take a look at a place like Thailand, especially what happened in the early 2000s, the tsunami, that's another thing in Asia, tsunamis, especially, the areas that are facing the Indian Ocean, they're usually very much affected. And then, of course, also like East Asia, Japan, for instance, right, they get a lot of tsunamis. So Asia is more natural disaster prone than Paraguay. And you're going to explain to us now what's going on in Paraguay. Why is Paraguay safer than Southeast Asia?
Well, to begin with, Paraguay is a landlocked country, so we have no coastline. So we can take out completely tsunamis and things like that. Then we're also not in a volcanic activities region. So that's another thing out. Then we can talk about earthquakes. Paraguay is really simple and really safe from earthquakes because we're not in an earthquake-prone zone. The only thing that Paraguayans have to worry about would be during the flooding season, but that's alongside the river. So people that live too close to the river would be affected, but the urban areas, they don't even notice basically. And then during the drought season, that's when the agriculture sector of Paraguay gets affected, which can vary a little bit, the fruits and vegetables that you get on the price since there's a little bit less, but it also doesn't really affect much on the daily life. So that's why Paraguay, it's actually a really calm and pretty friendly environment with no worries about that.
You briefly touched on the topic of earthquakes. I was in the Philippines in 2012, and I remember we had a drink at a rooftop bar in Cebu City in the Philippines, right? It's located on the island of Cebu. And that was in 2012, and there was an earthquake. And we were having drinks, and I was there with a friend of mine, and there was an earthquake. I was talking so much, I didn't even feel it. But he looked at me like, you didn't feel that just now? I'm like, no, what happened? Well, there was an earthquake. I didn't feel it. But everyone felt it, but not me. That was strange, I was like, okay. But that was probably the only time that I personally experienced an earthquake. Earthquakes are not very popular here. They're not very common, not very prominent here in Paraguay, right?
They're not. I think there was one around Argentina, and we had the after effect, but you barely felt it. It was more of a news thing rather than actually feeling it. So that would be it. No, it's pretty safe. It's pretty boring, I guess, if you like natural disasters, but
I think it's a trade-off, like everything and anything is in life. So in Paraguay's case, you're looking at a landlocked country that is safe from natural disasters because it does not have a coastline, and also because of its strategic location in the heart of South America. It's just not a natural disaster-prone area at all, whereas a place like Chile is a lot more prone to earthquakes and potentially also tsunamis, right? But Paraguay doesn't have that problem. Now, on the negative, Paraguay does not have a coastline. So if you value the ocean, then you're never going to have that. But it's safer.
That would be a problem if you really like the ocean, because we only have rivers and lakes. But, you can always, you're just a flight away. So you live this peaceful life, and whenever you want to go to the beach, you just take a flight, I guess. That's how we survive.
Yeah. And, you have nice beaches in southern Brazil, or if you want to fly to the Caribbean, you can do so via Panama, a short layover, maybe like an hour to 2 hours. You can be anywhere in the Caribbean, Aruba.
No, and we're pretty close to Brazil. Brazil has thousands of beaches that are just wonderful. It has a type of beach for every interest, I guess, because they have really calm beaches as well as, this wavy and cold ones. So it's pretty great, and it's not that far away. You can even drive there. So having a car, or you can rent one to go to Brazil, and that's it.
Now, you touched on a very important point here, which is the ease with which you can travel back and forth between countries that are part of Mercosur. Now, you can get the wider license plates here. They're called Mercosur license plates. And with a Mercosur license plate, you can travel by car back and forth, like I said, between countries that are part of Mercosur. So if you want to drive from Paraguay into southern Brazil, if you want to go to a beach in southern Brazil, no problem, you can do that. Or if you want to drive into Bolivia, no problem. Uruguay, Argentina, you can do that easily without needing an import permit. So it's a very flexible arrangement that Paraguayans and also the residents of Paraguay, so if you become resident of Paraguay, you're going to have access to this great union here that allows you to travel pretty freely within Mercosur. Now, in Southeast Asia's case, if you live in Vietnam, you cannot bring your vehicle from Vietnam into Cambodia, unless you're maybe like a government official. But you cannot import, you cannot just say, okay, tomorrow I'm going on a vacation. I'm going to drive to, Siem Reap or somewhere in southern, like Cambodia, where you have a nice beach. You can't do that. You cannot. So that's an issue because these countries don't have great agreements. Now, there's the concept of ASEAN, which is an economic alliance, but it's not as strong as it is in Mercosur. I think the best union alliance there is the European Union, because you can move freely within the union, not needing residency, right? So if you're a citizen of, say, Belgium, you want to go live in Spain, you can do that anytime you want. And it's very easy for you to register and go live there. In Paraguay's case, that's easier too. If you have a Paraguayan passport, you want to go live in Argentina, it's not very hard. It's very easy to do. But for someone from outside, there's a little bit more paperwork needed, but it's still a lot easier here than it is in Southeast Asia. Where if, for instance, in, between Thailand and Malaysia, they have what I like to call a double standard, because if you have a car from Malaysia, like license plates from there, you can drive the car into Thailand. And obviously there's paperwork that needs to be completed. It's not as easy as here, but you can do that. However, someone with a Thai license plate, be it a Thai national or foreigner with a vehicle in Thailand, you cannot drive your vehicle from Thailand into Malaysia. It's a double standard. And the same is also true for Singapore and Malaysia. Singaporeans can drive their car from Singapore into Malaysia, but Malaysians cannot drive their vehicle from Malaysia into Singapore. So they have the concept of ASEAN, but it's a very fragile concept. It does not allow for a lot of freedom. Whereas here, in my opinion, there's a lot more alliance. And there is a mutual understanding and a mutual standard that applies to all countries that are part of Mercosur. Not one is better than the other. Like, you have the same opportunities, you have the same options that someone from Argentina has, like moving or like bringing your vehicle into Argentina, and an Argentine citizen can easily bring their vehicle from Argentina into Paraguay. What do you think about that as a Paraguayan, hearing me talk about how importing a vehicle works in Southeast Asia? What are your thoughts?
For me, it sounds a little bit crazy, to be honest, because I'm so used to, moving across countries, just driving, no problem at all. Like, people in Ciudad del Este, they cross to Brazil, and people from Brazil cross to Paraguay every single day, because there's a lot of businesses going on. So Brazilians benefit a lot from Paraguayans, and Paraguayans from Brazilians. So they gave that a priority and made it really simple for both of them to just move across countries for the day or even a night, I guess. So it's really, really easy. With your ID, you just go around and you have no problems at all. And the cultures as well, they're really similar. So it's like you're going on a trip, but you don't leave your environment, I guess. So it's really nice. Besides, even if you want to have this one weekend trip, you go to Foz or even to Sao Paulo if you want to drive a long time. But yeah, it's crazy to me. I had no idea. I don't know. It seemed just so simple, and I got used to it.
I think the concept here is the closest to the EU that you can get. And I think the concept in Southeast Asia is probably as far as possible away from the European Union concept. The EU also has a lot of problems. So I'm not praising the EU and saying it's better than Asia. It's different, right? One is not better than the other. It's different. These unions, like ASEAN and the EU, they have a different value proposition. For instance, in Europe, if you have license plates and your vehicle is insured, it's legally registered, you can drive it into any EU country if you have a car from an EU country, right? It's easy to do. You don't need an import permit. There are no border checks for the vast majority. There are very few where they check up on you, and which is mainly due to uncontrolled migration these days. But technically, the EU concept is predicated on the free movement of goods and services within the Union, between EU member states. So Mercosur gets very close to that. We wanted to cover another very important topic that is downplayed a lot. Like people wipe it under the table. It's not really addressed, but it's one of the most important topics when it comes to your quality of life, when it comes to your life expectancy. One of the most important topics is the topic of air quality and pollution. And let's start out talking about Southeast Asia. Now, Southeast Asia is very industrial. Vietnam is a powerhouse. They have great manufacturing. A lot of the manufacturing that used to be done in China is now done in Vietnam because the US wanted to reduce its dependency on China. So they moved a lot of that out of China into Vietnam, and by the way, also into Mexico. However, there is a problem associated with rapid industrialization, and that's the topic of air quality, because in an emerging country, there's less regulation. There's just less awareness, there's less money for it. And a lot of these economies in Southeast Asia, they're doing great. They have good GDP growth and they're doing well. The median income is increasing steadily every single year, and there are more jobs across more sectors than 10 years ago, than 5 years ago. So that's a great fact. That's a great accomplishment for the citizens of Asia. So countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, also Malaysia, right? They're doing great. They have very diversified economies and they're doing very well. Where they're not doing so well is in surveilling these aspects of industrialization. And that's an issue. If you live in a Southeast Asian metropolitan, Ho Chi Minh City, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Manila, Phnom Penh, you don't really breathe fresh air. You don't breathe pure air. In a lot of these Southeast Asian metropolitans, air purity is less than 20%. Imagine that 80% of the air that you inhale every single day is polluted. It's poisonous. And long term, that's going to affect your health. And that's an issue. And the governments aren't really doing much about it because it's not important. Who cares about the health of the people if you can make more profit? However, I think longevity is important. In Paraguay's case, air pollution is less of a problem, I think, right? What do you think about air pollution here? What do you think about, what's going on? Is the air safe to breathe here? Is it unsafe? What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, in contrast to Southeast Asia and other countries, in Paraguay we don't have many factories and we do have a lot of vegetation around the whole country. So the air quality, it's pretty great if it's not perfect, You just have this fresh air and the lack of factories, So wherever you go in the city, Asunción, or anywhere in the country actually, you're going to see a lot of trees and plants, which also helps, with the heat.
Right.
Because Paraguay is a really hot country, and having this shade of the trees, it helps regulate a little bit.
I love that. For instance, just going for a walk in the summertime here, the white trees, they provide so much shade. It's comfortable walking there even when it's hot because you're always going to find a spot that's in the shades, right? So that's good. And like you said, with industries here, a lot of them don't exist, which is a pro and a con. It's a pro in terms of air quality and quality of life because air quality means quality of life, right? If you don't have air quality, you don't really have much. Now, on the negative, there are fewer jobs for Paraguayans, If those sectors were developed here, if they would move certain plants here, like manufacturing plants into Paraguay, there would be more jobs for Paraguayans, So that's something that's not happening, for a number of reasons, right? But I think overall, as an expat living here, I think that's a better deal. What are your thoughts?
Definitely. Besides, if we consider having factories and things like that, we also have to take into consideration that the soil will get kind of toxic, will get contaminated. And one of the main things in Paraguay is agriculture. And I think the agriculture here, it's pretty natural. We try to do it the most natural way possible. So everything that we ingest, even air or food, it's natural, so it doesn't hurt us. So that's something else that we have to take into consideration, whether there are no factories or if we want them in Paraguay,
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very good point. And you also touched on the greenery aspect, like plantation throughout the city. Now, there are more constructions happening here. There's no question about that. Apartment buildings are rising into the sky here. Many new constructions are happening here. There's just one outside here, by the way. However, there's still more like overall health awareness, because like you said, industries are missing, right? Certain sectors, like I said, they don't really exist here, right? And that also makes up for a better quality of life, I think. There's going to be fewer jobs, but, you can find other ways and means for generating an income. Now, I'm a dog owner, and I remember living in different Southeast Asian capitals, Ho Chi Minh City, Phnom Penh. Spent some time in Bangkok, never really lived there, but for instance, a place like Kuala Lumpur, very close to the equator, super hot, but they do have some parks there. Now, the problem is you cannot go walk your dog inside those parks. It's prohibited, right? So in a lot of Southeast Asia, I should say most probably, the parks there are not really dog friendly, and there aren't that many. In Bangkok, for instance, they have very few parks in the city, and very small ones, right? And even the parks they have, they won't allow you to walk your dog there. They don't want to see you walking your dog inside a park. That's sad, right? What's the situation like in Paraguay?
Parks, as you may say, for like walking parks, we don't have many, and like 2 of them are just people friendly, not pet friendly. Then you also have the option of walking around the block, around your neighborhood, because the residential areas, especially here, they're pretty safe and the roads are pretty calm. And with all of the trees and things like that, it's pretty easy and it's pretty nice to walk around it with your dogs. There's also La Costanera. That's this waterfront walkway, which a lot of people go to. So it has this really long walking trail. And a lot of people, after their jobs or before their jobs, they go there so they can walk with their dogs just next to the water and enjoy it, because it's a little bit fresher and it's not as hot as the other parts of the city. And it's pretty safe as well. So that's actually really nice.
If you're interested in relocating to Paraguay and obtaining residency here in South America, please consider our Paraguay Residency August 2025 specials. We offer big discounts on our packages this month. You can save $850 on our one-trip Paraguay residency package that gets you residency and national ID card in just one visit and in 3 months. If you're interested in relocating to Paraguay permanently or would like to spend at least a few months per year here, and you need additional services such as driver's license, bank account opening, and tax number, then you want to consider our Gateway package, which is built on the one-trip Paraguay residency package and comes with all these additional features that I just mentioned. Plus, you get access to our complimentary Paraguay introduction training and one-on-one time with me here in Asunción, Paraguay. Are you ready to secure your residency in Paraguay? Great. Go to nomadelite.com and click on book a consultation. I look forward to speaking to you and welcoming you to this beautiful country located in the heart of South America. Thank you for watching Nomad Elite. We truly appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to welcoming you to Paraguay.